The wind howled across the open prairie that night, carrying with it the bitter loneliness that had settled deep in my bones. I remember standing by the cracked wooden fence, staring out at the endless horizon where the sun had long since dipped behind the hills, leaving behind a bruised sky streaked with fire and ash. Life on the frontier was not kind to women like me, nor to men like him, the rancher whose land stretched wider than a woman's arms could ever hold, yet whose heart seemed emptier than the barren fields he worked day after day. I had come west with nothing but a satchel and a heart desperate for a place to belong. My hands were calloused from years of work, my spirit worn thin by loss, yet there was a stubborn ember inside me that refused to die. That ember carried me to his farm, though I never imagined how deeply it would change both our lives. He was a lonely man. You could see it in the way he moved, slow and steady, as though no one had ever hurried to greet him. You could hear it in the silence that clung to his cabin, broken only by the creak of the rocking chair or the restless sigh of the wind through the cracks. Folks said he'd buried his parents young, worked the land alone since boyhood, and learned to rely on no one but himself. But what struck me most wasn't just his solitude, it was how much he had forgotten what it meant to be touched by kindness, to be seen as more than just a rancher, more than just a man surviving the harsh world. The first time I laid eyes on him, he stood by the barn, a pitchfork in hand, dust clouding around his boots. His face was carved by years of sun and labor, his eyes shadowed, almost wary. I'd come looking for work, hoping to earn my keep in exchange for food and shelter. I remember how he paused, the weight of his gaze on me, as though he couldn't quite believe a woman had wandered onto his land. "You lost?" he asked, his voice rough like gravel under wagon wheels. "No," I replied, clutching my satchel. "Just looking for a place to rest my bones a while." He studied me for what felt like a lifetime, then gave a single nod. "And much here worth staying for?" But still, he let me in. Those first days were quiet, almost painfully so. I swept the cabin floors, cooked what little we had, and mended torn shirts by the fire. He worked from dawn to dusk, hardly speaking, though I caught him stealing glances when he thought I wasn't looking. It was as if he'd forgotten how to share space with another soul, his silence speaking louder than any words. Yet in that silence, I began to hear the unspoken truths, the loneliness, the longing, the fear of needing someone. The nights were the hardest. The cabin's walls creaked under the weight of the prairie winds, and I could feel the emptiness pressing in on him. One evening, I found him sitting at the table long after supper, staring at the wood grain as though searching for answers. His hands were rough, scarred from years of toil, and when I placed a cup of coffee in front of him, his fingers brushed mine. Just a fleeting touch. But in that moment, I felt the tremor that ran through him, the shock of contact, as though he hadn't been touched by tenderness in a lifetime. Something shifted after that. He began to linger at the table while I cooked, asking small questions about where I'd come from. I told him of the town I left behind, the family I lost to fever, the endless roads that led me here. He listened, his eyes softer than I'd seen before. In return, he spoke of the land, how the soil fought him, how the winters bit hard, how he'd learned to bury both hope and heartache under the same cold ground. One morning, as the dawn bled gold across the sky, I joined him in the fields. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of earth and horse sweat. I worked beside him, my hands blistering against the plow, my body aching. But he watched me with something close to awe, as though he'd never seen a woman willing to fight the land alongside him. "You don't quit easy," he said, almost smiling. "Neither do you," I answered. It was in those small moments, sharing bread by the fire, laughing at the stubborn mule that refused to move, watching the prairie sky burn with stars that I saw the man behind the rancher. Not just the solitude, but the tenderness hidden deep, waiting to be awakened. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun sink low, I noticed his hand resting on the rail, close to mine. The air was thick with unspoken words, the kind that make your heart pound in your throat. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he covered my hand with his. His palm was calloused, rough, but his touch was trembling, fragile, as though he feared I might pull away. "You're the first person to make this place feel alive," he whispered, voice breaking. Tears burned my eyes, for I knew then the weight of his loneliness, how deep it ran. And I knew too that my touch, my presence, had begun to heal something long buried. From that night forward, things changed. He laughed more, a low, rumbling sound that filled the cabin with warmth. He showed me the best places to watch the wildflowers bloom, the hidden creek where the water ran cold and clear. He no longer moved like a man carrying the world on his back, but like someone learning, for the first time, how to share the burden. Our bond was not built on grand gestures, but on the quiet moments, the brushing of hands while feeding the horses, the way he'd leave a blanket by my chair when the nights turned cold, the soft glance he'd give when he thought I wasn't looking. It was in those small, tender things that love took root. Looking back now, I realize the ranch didn't just give me shelter, it gave me a home. And he didn't just let me into his cabin, he let me into his heart, a heart that had long forgotten how it felt to be touched by love. The prairie is still harsh, the winters still bite, the soil still resists. But we face it together now, hand in hand. For in the wide, lonely stretches of the West, we found something rarer than gold, stronger than the fiercest storm. We found love not loud or fleeting, but steady, like the land itself. And I will never forget the first time his hand brushed mine, trembling with the weight of years. The first time he remembered what it was to be touched not by sorrow or hardship, but by the simple, healing grace of a woman's love.